you wake to the sound of something moving in the dark. Not gently. Something scratching, hooves shifting against wood. A goat, probably. In a Viking longhouse, animals sometimes sleep inside with the people, especially when the nights grow cold. It keeps them alive through the winter. It also means the first thing you smell each morning is not fresh air. It is smoke, wet wool, animal breath, old straw that has been slept on for longer than anyone would care to admit. You lie still for a moment, staring up at the low roof where the faintest gray light leaks through a smoke hole above the hearth. The fire never truly dies here. It smolders through the night, fed just enough to keep warmth in the room and wolves out of the darkness beyond the walls. It is the year 900, and you are waking inside a Viking village. From the outside, the settlement might almost disappear into the landscape. The houses are low and heavy, their timber frames packed with turf and earth. Grass grows across the roofs like thick green blankets. From a distance, it looks less like a village and more like a cluster of strange hills that learned how to smoke. That is not an accident. A place that is difficult to see is also difficult to raid. You push yourself upright and the cold reaches you instantly. Your boots touch packed earth that feels damp beneath the leather. The floor is not really a floor. It is dirt hardened by years of footsteps, ash from the hearth, scraps of straw, and the occasional thing no one bothered to clean up. After a few weeks living here, you probably would not notice anymore. Survival has a way of lowering your standards. Across the room, someone coughs. It is a deep sound, pulled from the chest like a stubborn splinter. Smoke collects in the rafters every night, and lungs here grow used to breathing air that always feels a little used already. A woman kneels beside the fire pit, stirring the embers back to life. Orange light slowly pushes the shadows away from the walls. As the flames rise, the longhouse begins to reveal itself. Beds line the edges of the room, simple wooden platforms layered with furs and straw. Several people still sleep there, tangled in blankets, their breathing slow and heavy. Nearby, 2 sheep shift lazily inside a small pen built along the wall. Sharing a roof with animals might seem unpleasant. Freezing to death outside would be worse. When the door opens, the cold morning air pushes into the longhouse like an uninvited guest. You step outside and the village spreads out before you beneath a pale northern sky. Mud lies everywhere, not soft mud either. This is thick ground churned by boots, hooves, spilled fish guts, and whatever else daily life tends to produce. Chickens scratch through it enthusiastically. A skinny dog trots past carrying something that looks suspiciously like half a bone. No one tries to stop him. Beyond the houses, the sea waits quietly in the fjord, gray water breathing slow mist into the morning air. Fishing boats sit along the shore like patient animals pulled halfway from the tide. Several men are already there, checking ropes and lifting heavy nets. You might expect loud warriors shouting orders. Instead, you hear quiet conversation and the dull slap of wet rope against wood. The truth about Viking villages is less heroic than the stories suggest. Most days are spent doing the same ordinary work people everywhere have always done: catching food, fixing tools, preparing for winter. But even in the calm light of morning, there is something uneasy beneath the routine. You notice it in the way several men glance toward the horizon while they work. Out here, the sea is not just a source of food. It is also a road. Ships arrive along that road. Some bring traders. Others bring trouble. For now, the village wakes slowly. Smoke rises from the longhouses as fires are fed again. Women carry buckets toward a narrow stream, careful not to spill precious water. Children run between buildings, their bare feet splashing through puddles as if the cold does not exist. Their laughter echoes across the muddy ground. It sounds bright. It also sounds fragile. Near the center of the settlement, a blacksmith has already begun working. His forge burns hot enough to push back the morning chill. Each strike of his hammer sends sparks flying into the air like angry fireflies. Tools are everything here. Without them, the village falls apart quickly. Knives for cutting meat, axes for splitting wood, iron hooks for fishing lines. Even a simple nail can mean the difference between a sturdy roof and a winter disaster. The blacksmith works slowly and carefully. Iron is valuable. Wasting it would be foolish. Nearby, a group of children watches with fascination as the glowing metal changes shape beneath the hammer. One boy flinches every time a spark jumps too close. It is easy to forget how dangerous small things can be. You continue walking through the village until another part of daily life becomes visible. Behind one of the longhouses, a young woman struggles to lift a heavy bucket from the ground. Her clothing is simple, rough wool tied with a faded cord. When she turns, you notice the way she keeps her eyes lowered as villagers pass. She is not part of the community in the same way the others are. She is a thrall. In Viking society, thralls are slaves. Some were captured during raids across distant shores. Others were born into the role, inheriting their status the same way someone else might inherit land. They haul water, clean animal pens, grind grain until their hands blister. The work that keeps the village alive often falls on their shoulders. It is not a comfortable truth, but Viking villages survive through hierarchy just as much as cooperation. Near the shoreline, another group of men gathers around a different kind of boat. This one is longer than the fishing vessels, narrow, elegant. The curved prow rises from the sand like the neck of some silent creature watching the sea. Shields hang along its sides, round and weathered. This is not a fishing boat, it is a longship. No one is boarding it today. The weapons stacked nearby remain quiet. Spears lean against the hull while a man runs a whetstone along the edge of an axe. Still, the ship waits, because someday soon the calm rhythm of fishing nets and wood chopping will not be enough. Supplies will run low. Silver will be needed. Rival clans may grow bold. When that day comes, the men who repair nets this morning will climb into that ship with shields and blades. And somewhere beyond the horizon, another village will wake to a morning that feels very different from this one. By midday, the village grows louder. Fish are hauled from boats and cleaned beside the shore. The smell of salt and fresh blood drifts across the air. Women hang long strips of meat and fish on wooden racks where wind and sun will slowly dry them. Preserving food is not just tradition here, it is insurance against hunger. Inside the longhouses, heavy pots simmer over the fire pits. Barley porridge thickens slowly while someone drops pieces of fish into the broth. The smell is strong but comforting. A warm meal means the village has survived another day. But as afternoon stretches toward evening, another side of this life reveals itself. Two men drag something heavy across the ground near the edge of the settlement. At first you think it might be a log for firewood. Then you notice the shape beneath the cloth covering it. A body. No one panics. No one screams. Death in a Viking village rarely arrives with ceremony. Illness, accidents, winter cold, even a simple infected wound can claim a life with quiet efficiency. The men carry the body beyond the houses toward a small rise overlooking the fjord. Funerals here are not always grand burning ships drifting across the sea the way modern stories describe. Most people receive something far simpler, a grave in cold earth, a few possessions placed beside them, a mound of soil raised quietly above the body. Life continues because it has to. As evening falls, the village gathers again inside the longhouses. Firelight flickers across tired faces. Someone tells a story while others eat slowly, grateful for warmth. Outside, the sea moves endlessly against the dark shoreline. Tomorrow the same work will begin again. Fishing nets will be lifted. Wood will be chopped. Children will run through mud as if the world is perfectly safe. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the fjord, sails may already be moving toward another shore. That is the strange truth about life in a Viking village. It is not constant battle. It is something more complicated. A fragile balance between ordinary life and sudden violence, between cooperation and hierarchy, between the simple hope of feeding your family and the harsh reality that sometimes survival demands taking from someone else. History remembers the raids, but the people who lived here would remember something else entirely. The smell of smoke in their hair, the cold mud beneath their boots, and the quiet understanding that tomorrow, if fortune allowed it, they would wake up and endure the same difficult world all over again. The body is buried before the sun disappears completely. There is no grand ceremony, no burning ship drifting into the horizon the way later stories will describe. Those rituals are rare and expensive. Most people in a Viking village leave the world the same way they lived in it, quietly, with very little space to spare. The men finish covering the grave with damp earth while the wind moves slowly across the hillside. A few stones are placed on top to mark the spot. Someone murmurs a short prayer to the old gods. Then the villagers begin walking back toward the houses. You might expect grief to stop everything. It does not. Because here, life cannot pause for very long. By the time the sky darkens fully, smoke once again pours from the longhouse roofs. Cooking fires burn brighter now, their orange glow flickering against the wooden walls. Inside one of the buildings, a large pot of barley stew bubbles slowly above the hearth. People gather close to the warmth. The longhouse fills with the sounds of eating, quiet conversation, and the occasional tired laugh. Someone tears a piece of bread and dips it into the stew. A child complains about the taste of dried fish before being reminded that winter meals will be far worse. You might smile at that. Complaining about dinner is apparently a timeless human tradition. Yet, even here, in the comfort of firelight, the reality of Viking life never completely disappears. Fleas live in the furs spread across the sleeping platforms. Smoke curls through the rafters and settles into lungs that will never quite feel clean again. Outside, the wind presses against the walls, testing every seam in the timber. And somewhere beyond the darkness of the fjord, other villages sit along other shorelines. Some are friendly, some are not. A man near the doorway sharpens a small knife against a whetstone while listening to the conversation around him. The soft scrape of metal on stone repeats again and again. No one asks why he is doing it tonight instead of tomorrow. In a place like this, being prepared rarely feels like wasted effort. Eventually, the stories begin. One of the older men leans back against the wooden wall and begins describing a voyage he made years earlier. His voice rises and falls with dramatic pauses. He speaks of distant islands, strange markets where silver changed hands, and storms that nearly split their ship apart. The children listen with wide eyes. The adults listen too, though their expressions are quieter. They understand something the children do not yet know. Most voyages are not heroic adventures. They are cold, dangerous, exhausting, and sometimes they bring back more than trade goods. Sometimes they bring prisoners. Thralls captured from villages that looked very much like this one before a longship appeared on their horizon. The thought lingers in the back of your mind as the fire slowly burns lower. You look around the longhouse again. The same people who laughed a few minutes ago now move more slowly as fatigue settles into their shoulders. Someone feeds another piece of wood into the hearth. Another person pulls a fur blanket closer against the creeping night chill. For a moment, everything feels calm, but calm here is always temporary. Winter will come again soon enough, bringing storms that trap boats in the harbor and freeze the earth so hard that even digging a grave becomes difficult. Hunger may follow if the stores run low. Illness might slip through the village in the dark weeks, when smoke hangs thick in every house and bodies crowd close together for warmth. And then there is the sea. The same water that feeds this village can just as easily carry enemies across the horizon. Living here means accepting that uncertainty as part of daily life. Perhaps that is what shaped the people we now remember as Vikings. Not just the raids or the battles, but the constant awareness that survival was never guaranteed. It had to be earned every single day. The fire burns down slowly until the longhouse fills with softer shadows. One by one, people stretch out along the wooden sleeping platforms, wrapping themselves in heavy furs. The animals settle again in their pen, their slow breathing mixing with the quiet sounds of the room. Outside, the fjord lies dark and silent beneath the northern sky. If you listen closely, you might hear waves touching the shore in slow, patient rhythms, the same sound that greeted the first people who built this village generations ago. Tomorrow morning, the smoke will rise again. Fishermen will return to their boats. Children will run through mud. The blacksmith will lift his hammer and shape another piece of glowing iron, and the longship by the shore will still be waiting, ready for the day when survival demands something harsher than fishing and farming. History often remembers these people only as warriors crashing onto foreign beaches, but if you stood here long enough, watching a full day pass inside a Viking village, you would understand something far more human. Most of their lives were not spent fighting. They were spent enduring the cold, the hunger, the uncertainty, the quiet fear that tomorrow might bring storm, sickness, or sails on the horizon. And yet, morning after morning, they woke up anyway. They fed the fire, they repaired the nets, they carried water, chopped wood, and cooked meals beside the same smoky hearths. Because survival in a place like this was not a single heroic act. It was thousands of small decisions repeated every day by people who simply refused to disappear.